It turns out I didn't play all that many new games this year. Many of my favourite games that I enjoyed through the year were from previous years, 2023, and in fact much earlier than that, much earlier, as you'll see later in the video, and that was a big surprise to me. Now, through this video, I want to talk briefly about the games that I enjoyed over the course of 2024 and get your feedback on what you spent your time playing. In fact, as I'm talking here, why not send a comment below to let me know what games you played throughout 2024. So here is the list of games I enjoyed playing. This is timestamped, so you can jump between them. My favourite game of the year is a question mark, because I don't want to spoil that for people who want to work their way through the video. And then right at the end of the video, there is, well, what turned out to be a big surprise for me, and something I never expected to spend so much time playing. So let's start with one of the games that did release this year. It was Star Trucker. Now this is an indie game, it's set in space and it's all about hauling cargo. Now the aesthetics for this one are obviously somewhat tongue-in-cheek because you do drive a big rig through space. And whilst on paper this should sound cheesy, well, it actually works, and it works very well. I found the game to be very chill and very relaxing. Now though you do have to drive along highways, you can't really free fly through space. Well, you can, but expect a lot of damage if you do so. So yeah, you kind of have to stick to the freeways, but you know what? It still works. To me, it felt somewhat like a hybrid between a Euro Truck Simulator and a regular space game. There's a selection of different missions you can pick up along the way, and over time you'll learn new perks and new rewards. And there's something ultimately very retro about this whole experience. And as we go through this video, I think you're going to find that is a unifying theme through many of the games that I enjoyed this year. Now, this one was a long time in development, but it finally released this year into early access. The title is Manor Lords, and it's one of the best city builders that I've played for a very long time. This is a medieval builder, and for me this really kicked things up a notch, taking things much further than we've seen from AAA releases in the similar genre. For starters, not only do you get the typical bird's eye view that you normally have in this type of game, but you can zoom right in to a third-person view and walk around your creations and your villages. What's more, one thing I really enjoyed here is the lack of gatekeeping. No timers, no other nonsense to keep you away from the type of gameplay you enjoy. In other words, it's not a Skinner box, and there's no monetization in here. It's just a pure classic old game, and yeah, something I really did like. For me, it wasn't just about the gameplay itself, but the aesthetics as well. There was something, well, just really immersive about the entire experience. Some really nice building designs that lead collectively to some stunning villages and towns. Now, moving back to the space genre, we had Sins of a Solar Empire 2. Now, this game released on Steam this year, and I actually found myself spending more time than I ever expected on it. This was largely caused not by the fact that the game just got really nice gameplay, but by the fact that you can really highly customize the play sessions. Whether you want to dive into a strategy game with many hours of a play session for you to create your empire and conquer everyone around you, or whether you just want to set it up for a relatively short play session that you can complete in an hour or two. And this, for me, is what really drove Sins of a Solar Empire 2 home for me. Also are the nice ship designs here, and the fact that you can create some very large fleets of ships as well. Sending these over to an enemy empire, it's just so satisfying them to see them bombard an enemy planet, and seeing those little nuclear-style explosions from orbit, and eventually the message saying that you had conquered and colonized that world, and seeing the borders of your empire expand ever further, and seeing those same borders of the enemy retreating backwards to a smaller area, eventually reaching their homeworld and taking that as well if you can. Mixed together with some really nice research trees and overall perks, it just makes Sins of a Solar Empire 2 a really nice package, especially for those of you that enjoy 4X games as I do. Now, over the years, ever since, well, I was very young actually, I've always been a big fan of Japanese RPGs, JRPGs. And for this reason, I think I really did like Sea of the Stars. Now, this one, whilst not designed from a Japanese studio, definitely followed the design philosophy for many of those games. If you played anything like Octopath Traveler in recent years, then you'll know exactly what to expect from Sea of Stars. Now this one did have some really nice environments, although I will say in some respects I did find those environments at least a little bit too linear. But thanks to the story and the overall nature of the combat, it really helped to overcome that and just really pulled the whole experience together so that it was greater than the sum of its parts. Whilst this certainly isn't one of the best Japanese-style RPGs out there, it is certainly the best one I played this year. A more recent game I've played is Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This one, of course, is another blast from the past, even though it's a brand new game. The reason for that is because, unlike the movies we've seen over the past couple of years, or the past decade or two, this Indiana Jones feels very much like it was released in the 1980s. It really does follow on from the 3 sets of movies that were released during the 80s. Now, The Great Circle is set between Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones The Last Crusade. Harrison Ford himself didn't take up the role. Instead, the character was voiced by Troy Baker, who did an absolutely amazing job, and if you didn't know better, you'd probably, like me, even believe initially that it was Harrison Ford himself who actually voiced this game. The story itself very neatly fits into Indiana Jones mythos and cliches even. Also enjoyed the combat here, and surprisingly, the developers managed to make a fantastic use of Indy and his whip. Really nice game then, something I did really enjoy playing, and very much a blast from the past. For me, it really was the movie that we never got. And finally, we come to what is easily my favourite game of the year. It was Space Marine 2. Now, I'm a massive fan of Warhammer 40,000, but that doesn't mean to say I'm a fan of every single Warhammer game. There's a whole selection of Warhammer games out there that I don't feel are particularly great, but well, there was something very special about Space Marine 2. And this, I felt, was largely because it really felt like a game from the early 2000s, around about 2005 to 2006. Felt really like an old Xbox title, and that in the best of ways. It's like the developers took all the good elements of what made a good shooter back then and then brought them up to the modern era and didn't ingrain all the normal time sinks we get, all the monetization and all the other nonsense that is designed for a so-called modern audience. For me then, Space Marine 2 very much felt like literally jumping into the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Some really, really gorgeous environments here, and seeing the power of Space Marines firsthand and even be able to act as one, well, that was something else entirely. Really, really nice stuff. Of course, the game itself has been widely received very well, although there's some criticisms in some areas for the story campaign being relatively short. And yes, it's true, it is short, but 7 hours I think I've finished it in, 7 to 10 hours, but it's a very short game. But for me, I don't see this or feel this as a criticism. I've always felt that it's not better to have a well-crafted short game than it is to have a bloated game that's mediocre at best. For me then, Space Marine 2 was easily my top game of 2024, but that said, surprisingly, and this is why I'm very surprised, it's not my best overall gaming experience of 2024. That very much is in the realms of the retro gaming experience. Now, I've dabbled with retro gaming many times over the years, but this year I picked up a retro handheld console, and I've got to say, it's much better than I could ever have imagined. Probably one of the best gaming devices I've ever owned. I've got the Miu Mini Plus. It's like a little mini original Game Boy, and it actually emulates virtually every single console from the Ataris of the late 70s all the way up to the PlayStation 1 and virtually every arcade machine in between. I've rediscovered absolutely dozens, if not hundreds of games that I loved in my childhood and early adulthood. Being able to jump into a selection of Amiga games or Spectrum games has been just fantastic, and revisiting those arcade machines of the 80s has been allowing me to recapture those old experiences with perfect one-to-one recreations of those coin-op machines. Now, if you don't know about these, retro gaming on this side of retro gaming has gone into an absolute boom in 2024. There's absolute dozens of these different handheld consoles about, if not hundreds, all by different manufacturers, many of them by the same manufacturers. Often they can come pre-configured with many different games installed on them. They're very easy to use and very easy to carry around as well. Now, I don't want to dive into too many details about this little handheld console right yet, as that's not what this video is about, but if it's something you do want to hear more about and my time and experience with it, then do let me know and maybe I'll create a dedicated video for it over the coming weeks. At any rate, those are my experiences in the terms of the gaming world for 2024. Do let me know in the comment section what you enjoyed throughout this year. Did you play new releases, or did you play games from the previous years, or even from entirely different eras? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.